Rain hammered the diner windows while the waitress set our plates down like they might break from sound alone. Her voice was a thread, there, but barely. And before she could slip away, I asked, "Why do you seem scared to talk?" She froze with one hand on the table, eyes bright with an answer she'd been swallowing for years. Then she took a breath. The diner's windows wore the storm like a second skin, rain threading down the glass in steady silver lines that made the neon sign ripple and blur. Inside, the room felt larger than it was, half the booths empty, the air holding that soft hum of a place trying to be warm while the weather insisted otherwise. Daniel wrapped both hands around his coffee mug the way people do when they want warmth to choose a side. And across from him, Lily pressed her fingertip into the fogged window, drawing a lopsided smiley face and then erasing it with her sleeve, delighted by the magic of making and unmaking. He noticed her before she reached them, how the young waitress navigated each table as if the floor might give way, shoulders slightly lifted as though bracing for something invisible. The notepad trembled a little in her grip. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper, not the confidential kind used for secrets, but the careful kind used for survival. She collected plates like they were fragile instruments and thanked people as though the word thanks might sting on the way out. "Hi there," Lily said when she arrived. 7 is an age that believes every new person is a could-be friend. "Do you have the kind of pancakes that get crunchy on the edges?" The waitress smiled, quick, apologetic, and nodded, eyes flitting down to her notepad. "We can. I can ask for them a little longer on the grill." The words came soft and almost weightless, like she was trying not to wake something sleeping. Daniel watched the way her gaze avoided faces, the way her lips tightened around words as if they were painful to push through. "Coffee's great," he said, tipping his mug gently to show appreciation without making it a thing. "And she'll take the adventure pancakes." Lily giggled. "Adventure pancakes," she repeated to the waitress, savoring the phrase like it might help. The young woman wrote it down and nodded again. "I'll be right back." She slid away toward the pass, and Daniel noticed the brief exhale she let out once she turned, the kind people release when a moment has passed without incident. Lily leaned across the table, small elbows on Formica, hair escaping her braid in rain-soft curls. "Daddy, why does she look so sad?" Daniel searched his daughter's face, measuring what to say and how much. There were truths you don't hand to a 7-year-old all at once. You fold them into smaller pieces so they fit her pockets. "Sometimes people have hard days," he offered. "And sometimes hard days last a while." Lily nodded in the solemn way children do when they decide to believe you. She returned to the window, redrawing the smiley face and giving it a lopsided crown. Daniel sipped his coffee and listened to the diner breathe. The sizzle from the flat top, the rattle of plates, the low radio playing a song no one quite remembered. The waitress floated through the aisle again with a plate balanced in each hand. Another table's order, lips pressed thin as if the weight she carried had nothing to do with food. He felt the tug then, the familiar ache of recognition you get when someone else's quiet looks like a language you once spoke. He didn't know her story, but he knew the posture of someone who'd learned to make themselves small. Responsibility had taught him a different kind of quiet, the kind you wear to keep your world steady for a child. But he could still hear the difference between silence as refuge and silence as punishment. The food arrived with a careful clink. Pancakes for Lily, eggs for Daniel, steam rising up like a second storm that smelled of butter and good intentions. The waitress set down the plates, stepped back, and started to turn away. The moment was small enough to miss, but Daniel felt it land in his chest. He didn't want to pry. He also didn't want to let a person keep drowning next to him while he pretended not to see. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice low, his posture open. The words were gentle, as if he were approaching a spooked animal and didn't want to startle it. "I don't mean to pry, but why do you seem so scared to talk?" For half a second, everything in the diner narrowed to the space between them. The rain on the glass, Lily's fork hovering above a golden edge, the radio's singer holding a long note like a bridge. The waitress's hand froze on the table's edge. Her eyes brightened with sudden water, and her breath came quick and shallow, the way a person breathes when the past has just pulled a chair up to their present. Daniel wished he could reach out and take the question back, and also knew that questions, once asked with care, sometimes built the only door out of a locked room. He gave her the smallest nod. a promise that he'd listen if she chose to step through. Lily sat very still, as if she felt a rule of the moment she couldn't yet name. The waitress swallowed, once, twice, like words were a hard thing to move. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely there, but it was hers. And that was the beginning. She didn't move at first, the way people don't move when they're deciding whether to run or to stand where they are and let the moment pass through them. Her hand stayed on the table's edge like an anchor that had suddenly remembered it was just metal and hope. Daniel held the space with a small nod. No rush, no pressure, letting the rain do the talking for him. Lily, sensing the weight without understanding it, set her fork down carefully as if placing it might make less noise than gravity. "Aye." The waitress's voice thinned, then steadied. She glanced over her shoulder toward the counter where the cook was bent over the flat top, unbothered. No one was watching. No one ever seemed to watch when it mattered. Her eyes returned to Daniel, then to Lily, then to the table's laminate where a scratch ran like a tiny river through the fake stone. "I'm not good at it anymore." Talking. Daniel kept the word soft, as though it might bruise. She nodded once. "It used to be easy." A breath. Another. And then it wasn't. Something in the way she said it, clean, unadorned, made Daniel feel the outline of a larger story without needing to see it all at once. He didn't reach for details. He didn't offer solutions. People who were taught to be quiet weren't typically helped by someone rushing to fill the silence. Lily's fingers crept toward the plate. She shifted the top pancake just enough to peek at the crisped edge and whispered, to no one in particular, "Adventure." The word put a thin smile on the waitress's mouth. Not joy exactly, but a reminder that the muscle still worked. "Thank you for telling me," Daniel said. "You don't owe me more than that." Her eyes glossed again. Gratitude mingled with relief that he hadn't turned the moment into a cross-examination or a rescue. "Most people ask what happened," she said, "or tell me to be confident like it's a switch." "I don't think it's a switch," Daniel answered. "More like a dimmer you have to find again in the dark." The smallest laugh escaped her, surprised, unready, but real. She pressed a knuckle to her lip as if to keep it from running away. "I used to talk a lot," she admitted in a hush that carried a memory's heat. "At school, with friends, at work." Her gaze flicked to the past where tickets hung like little white flags. "Then someone told me I sounded wrong. Too bright. Too much." The words arrived like stones placed one at a time, measured for weight. "After a while, I believed it. You can't forget your own sound." Across the booth, Daniel heard a quiet echo inside himself. Different details, similar shape. The years he'd learned to speak softly, so Lily would never associate love with thunder. The choice had been his, not demanded, but discipline could still feel like erasure on the days he wanted to be loud. He watched the waitress breathe and thought about how long a person has to carry a false story before it starts to feel custom-made. "You don't sound wrong," Lily said with the declarative certainty of a 7-year-old who has just discovered gravity and thinks she invented it. "You sound like when the radio is quiet in the car and Dad says, 'That's a good song.'" The waitress turned to Lily as if the girl had just translated a language for her. She could have argued. Shame almost always does. But Lily's face was open, the kind of open that doesn't know how to lie about music. The waitress swallowed again. "Thanks," she whispered. It came out steadier, a thread inside the whisper that hadn't been there a minute ago. A bell dinged from the kitchen. She flinched only a little. "I should. Your syrup," she said, gesturing toward the counter. "We're okay," Daniel told her. "Take your time." She hesitated, then stayed. The choice itself a tiny act of defiance against whatever rulebook had been written for her. "It's silly," she murmured, almost to herself. "It's just words. But when I try to say them, I hear someone else saying them wrong." Her hand left the table and hovered midair, unsure whether to curl or reach. "So I make them small. It feels safer." Daniel nodded, not to agree that small was safer, but to show he understood the math. "Sometimes small keeps you from being hit," he said. "It also keeps you from being heard." Her eyes lifted to meet his, a brief, searching look that checked for judgment and found none. She took a breath that seemed to touch the bottom of her lungs, then set her hand flat on the table, palm down, like she was staking a claim on something she hadn't owned in a while. "I'm trying," she said. There was apology in it, and also announcement. "I can't hear that," Daniel replied. The bell dinged again, a little more impatient, and this time she didn't flinch at all. Syrup, she said, and the word had a shade more color. She started to go, then paused, turning back not as a server, but as a person choosing a sentence. Thank you for asking kindly. He felt the corners of his mouth lift. Thank you for answering. She brought the syrup, warm, in a little metal pitcher that radiated comfort, and set it down with a steadier hand. If you need anything else, I'll be right over there, she said, pointing to the counter and then catching herself. I mean, I'll be around. It wasn't a perfect line, it didn't need to be. She let the sentence stand and didn't rush to apologize for it. After she left, Lily leaned in. Dad, what does be heard mean? Like louder? Sometimes louder, he said. Sometimes just you, even if your voice shakes. Lily considered this with great seriousness and then poured an ambitious river of syrup that threatened to breach pancake banks. I think her voice is good, she decreed. It sounds like when rain hits the car roof before we go inside. I like that sound. Me too, Daniel said. At the counter, the waitress picked up another order, said thanks to the cook in a voice the room almost missed, and then didn't follow it with sorry. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was movement in a direction that mattered. Daniel watched her navigate a world that had insisted she take up less space and decided that sometimes the kindest question is not the one that digs, but the one that opens. He cut into his eggs. Lily tackled the mission of syrup containment with the gravity of a civil engineer. The rain pressed its steady palms against the glass. Somewhere between the bell and the radio and the clink of forks, a different kind of quiet began to take root. The kind that comes when a person chooses to let themselves be heard, even just a little, even just for one table on a stormy night. The lull between dinner and the late shift settled over the diner, the kind of hour when conversations go softer and the radio feels closer. The waitress returned with a small pot to warm Daniel's coffee and a paper cup of extra syrup Lily hadn't asked for. She set both down as if placing offerings, then stood there, hesitating, eyes on the tabletop's tiny river scratch as though it might carry her words somewhere safe. I can tell you a little, she said at last. The sentence was simple, but it arrived like something she'd carried in both hands. Daniel's first instinct was to say she didn't have to. He almost did, almost let her off the hook he worried he'd created. But he caught himself. She wasn't asking for an exit. She was choosing a door. I'll listen, he said. She nodded, tightening her grip on the coffee pot until the metal squeaked. It wasn't one thing, she began. It was small things, dropped every day. She glanced at Lily, measuring. When she continued, she kept her words gentle, like stones set carefully on a path. He said my voice made rooms tired. That when I got excited I sounded young, and when I got serious I sounded sharp. He started answering for me, or correcting how I said something, then laughing like we were both in on the joke. Daniel felt a slow heat rise under his ribs, anger's first draft, but he kept his face still. This wasn't about his reaction. It was about giving her a shoreline to aim for. That sounds exhausting, he said. It was, she answered. At first I pushed back. I thought if I explained, he'd hear me. She let out a thin, rueful breath. But explaining became a job, and I was bad at it, apparently. He'd repeat my sentences in a different voice, his version of mine, until I started hearing that version before I even opened my mouth. Her gaze lifted for a second, direct, almost defiant. I'm not repeating his words. I don't want them in the room. You don't have to, Daniel said. She set the coffee pot down. The counter bell dinged. She didn't move. One day he told me we'd both be happier if I just kept it light. No big opinions, no strong feelings. We were at a friend's place. People heard. I laughed like it was fine because I didn't want to make it worse. After that, I stopped telling stories. I kept things small, safe. It felt like choosing peace. She pressed her thumb to the table edge, as if testing the wood's honesty. But it wasn't peace. It was quiet where I disappeared. Daniel looked at Lily, who was tracing a circle in a pool of syrup with the back of her fork, listening the way children do when they sense the stakes. He wanted to protect her from every jagged truth and also wanted her to hear the important ones with care and dignity. Sometimes people confuse peace with silence, he said, mostly to the table, partly to the past. They aren't the same. The waitress's eyes shifted to him, curious. You know that? I've learned it, Daniel said. He didn't add the rest. The years after Lily's mother left, when he trained his voice to be weatherproof, strong enough to set a steady temperature at home. The nights he stood in the kitchen practicing words that wouldn't scare a child who'd already lost too much. He had chosen restraint, not had it forced on him. Still, he understood the ache of holding yourself down until you wondered where the rest of you had gone. Lily spoke without looking up. My teacher says when someone talks over you, you can raise your hand and wait. She says the waiting is powerful. She glanced at the waitress. I think you waited a long time. The waitress's mouth trembled and then found balance. I did, she said. And when the waiting didn't help, I left. She let the sentence rest, uncluttered. The leaving was loud, even if I didn't say much. Daniel nodded. Sometimes leaving is the first loud thing a person does for themselves. She smiled at that, small, but it reached her eyes. After I left, the quiet was different. It wasn't empty. It was room. But I still don't always trust my voice in it. She tapped her throat once, an absent gesture of someone checking that the instrument is still there. When I speak, I hear him hearing me. She grimaced softly. That probably doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, Daniel said. Echoes don't care whether the person is still in the room. Another table flagged her, and her posture shifted, the practiced glide of service returning. She raised a hand to say she'd be right there, then stayed another heartbeat with Daniel and Lily, choosing to finish what she'd started. It helps when someone listens without fixing, she said. It helps even more when someone small says she likes my voice. Her eyes went to Lily and softened. Thank you for that. Lily shrugged, shy and pleased. It sounds like a good song, she repeated. Then, after a beat, do you have a favorite song? The question surprised the waitress into an honest laugh, quiet but free. I used to, she said. I'm finding new ones. Okay, Lily said gravely. We'll help. She turned to Daniel. We can make a list. We can. He agreed, making a mental note to pick songs that felt like windows opening. The waitress lifted the coffee pot again, steadier now. I need to grab their order, she said, tilting her head toward the raised hand. But I'm around. She started to move, then looked back. And I'm practicing. We can hear that, Daniel said. She returned to work, and the room resumed its slow choreography. Plates sliding onto rails, the bell's small declarations, the radio a low companion. Daniel watched her at the other table, the way she planted both feet before she spoke, the deliberate breaths she took between sentences. Practice looked like that, ordinary, unglamorous, brave in no way that a stranger could measure. Lily nudged one of her pancakes toward him, an offer more than a request. He took a forkful and gave it back. They ate in a comfortable hush, the kind that asks nothing and gives a person space to become a little more themselves. When the waitress passed again with a tray, she caught Daniel's eye and, without stopping, mouthed a quick, thanks. It was still quiet, but it was her quiet. And that, Daniel thought, was the part no one could steal. She circled back a few minutes later, the coffee pot a polite excuse for return. The storm had gentled to a steady curtain. The windows no longer rattled, they breathed. She topped off Daniel's mug, set the pot down, and stood with both hands braced on the edge of the table, as if she were reminding herself she belonged at the conversation, not just at the service. Are the pancakes okay? She asked Lily. Lily considered the plate with the ceremony of a critic. They are crunchy on the edges, she said, pleased. Then, after a beat, could you say adventure pancakes again? The request startled a laugh out of the waitress, quick and real. Adventure pancakes, she repeated, and this time the words carried a small lift at the end like they'd remembered their own brightness. Lily nodded, satisfied. I like it when it sounds like that, she said. Like you're telling the pancakes, they can be brave. Daniel kept still, letting the moment arrange itself. Praise from adults can feel like a mirror. Praise from a child sometimes feels like a window opening. The waitress's shoulders dropped half an inch. She touched the metal pitcher with her fingertips, as if verifying that something solid still existed. Sometimes my sentences run away, she confessed quietly. I lose them before they reach people. They didn't run, Lily said. They stayed. The waitress's mouth softened. Thank you. She looked at Daniel, searching for the thing adults often add, correction, suggestion, the map of how to improve, and found only attention. It's funny, she added. I used to love reading aloud. I liked how a sentence could feel different depending on where you breathe. Breathe where it's kindest to you, Daniel said. The rest will follow. She let that land. Then she glanced at the order pad in her apron, pulled it free, and looked at the scribbled shorthand that only she could decode. Would it be weird, she asked, if I tried one full sentence? Just to see. Not weird, Daniel said. She lifted her chin a fraction, put the pad away, and looked directly at Lily. If you need anything else, I'll be right here, and I can bring more syrup or warm your pancakes a little if they get cold. The words came like a careful crossing of stepping stones. Not rushed, not apologetic. Finished. Lily grinned as if someone had pulled a rabbit from a hat. That sounded like the radio when the singer holds the good part. The waitress blinked hard and then laughed again, softer. She placed her palm flat on the table, claiming a small, neutral piece of earth, then took it back, the gesture leaving a warmth behind. You two picked a good night to come in, she said, almost to herself. It feels like the room is friendlier. The room hears you, Daniel said. A bell chimed from the counter. She flinched less than before and didn't look away immediately. I should grab that, she said, then added, with a steadier middle, I'll be right back. When she moved off, Lily leaned across the booth in a whisper that was not a whisper at all. Dad, did you hear? She did the sentence with all the parts. I heard, he said, smiling into his coffee. I think maybe the words are like cats, Lily continued, very serious. If you chase them, they hide. If you sit still, they come over. Daniel considered it. That's a good theory, he said. We'll test it. The waitress returned with a tray bound for another table, but she paused as she passed them, the pause itself an act of trust. I tried the cat way, she murmured, amused. It worked. She balanced the tray on one hand and, without prompting, added, Thank you for being a quiet place. You're doing the loud part, Daniel answered. We're just here. At the far booth, a customer asked for hot water and lemon. She acknowledged them with a clear, I've got you, then glanced back at Daniel and Lily as if to confirm that the sentence had landed where she aimed it. It had. She went on. Lily returned to her window art, drawing a second face next to the first, then connecting them with a crooked line that looked, to Daniel, exactly like a bridge sketched by someone who had only ever crossed rivers on foot. They're holding hands, she announced, so they don't fall. Daniel watched the waitress at the other table manifest that drawing in motion, hands steady, voice audible, mistakes allowed to stand without apology. Practice, he thought, is a bridge you build while walking across it. Some nights the lumber is fear. Some nights it's kindness. On good nights you get both, and the structure holds. She finished her run and came back with napkins and water without being asked. I'm practicing something else, she said, resting the napkins like small white flags of truce. Not saying sorry every third word. How's it going? Daniel asked. Her smile tilted. I almost said it just now. You can replace it with thank you, Lily offered, matter of fact. My teacher says that's better. The waitress nodded like someone pocketing a tool. Thank you, she said to Lily, trying it on. It fit. A gust of rain drum rolled the window. The diner gathered into itself. The radio, the clink, the breath of people making a temporary community around plates and cups. The waitress stood in that small orchestra and found a part. When the bell called again, she lifted the tray and straightened, not taller, exactly, but more aligned with herself. Before she left, she looked at them one more time. I'll check on you in a few, she said. No shrinking, no soft fade at the end. A simple promise, evenly said. Lily saluted with her fork. We'll be here, she pledged. And that was the bridge. A child's plain kindness laid plank by plank. A father's patience holding the rope. A young woman crossing, one steady sentence at a time, toward a shore she recognized as her own. It started as a promise to ourselves and then turned into something the week expected. Friday nights at the diner. Same booth by the rain-streaked window. Same small negotiations with the world that made the room feel like ours for an hour. Lily began greeting the door as if it were a friend. Adventure pancakes, she would announce to no one and everyone, as if naming the ritual helped it hold. The waitress met them with a steadier voice each time, not louder exactly, just less afraid of its own echo. Welcome back, she'd say, the words landing fully, not tapering into apology. The first Friday after the storm, she carried over a little metal pitcher already warm. For you, she told Lily, and then, catching herself before the old habit returned, added, Thank you for being here. Lily produced a folded piece of paper from her jacket pocket, like a magician revealing the final card. Our song list, she said. The letters were large and earnest, spaced like careful stepping stones. She slid it across the table with ceremony. We picked ones that feel like windows. The waitress read the titles aloud under her breath, testing where to breathe, smiling when a word surprised her mouth. I know this one, she said, tapping a line. I used to play it when I closed. She hesitated, then let the memory stand. It sounded like morning. Good, Lily decided. Morning is brave. The weeks organized themselves around these small exchanges. Some nights the diner was quiet enough that the radio's low hum felt like company. Other nights the bell at the pass kept time, and the air filled with the soft collide of plates and requests. When that happened, the waitress still caught herself bracing, as if the room might grade her, but she recovered faster, like a pianist finding the melody after a missed note. She would plant both feet, lift her chin a fraction, and choose the sentence she wanted instead of the one that hit her. Daniel learned the geography of her progress, the way she touched her throat before a longer string of words, the way she set down a plate and stayed an extra heartbeat to complete a thought instead of fleeing it. He didn't cheer. He didn't narrate growth back to her as proof. He simply met each sentence with listening so that the room could mirror something kinder than what it used to say. On the third Friday, Lily asked, "Can I try your sentence?" The waitress looked amused and a little nervous. "Which one?" "The one that has the parts." The waitress inhaled, smiled, and said, with deliberate ease, "If you need anything else, I'll be right here, and I can bring more syrup or keep your pancakes warm." She let the period land. Lily clapped once, delighted. "That's a whole paragraph," Lily declared. "It is," the waitress said, surprised into laughter. "I didn't apologize even once." "You can say thank you if you want," Lily advised. "It's like a hug for words." "Thank you," the waitress told her, and it fit again. There were setbacks, because practice always keeps its honesty. One Friday the bell at the pass sounded sharper than usual, and a string of orders stacked up like a narrow bridge. The waitress approached their table with the coffee pot and opened her mouth to ask about refills, but the question thinned on the way out. She set the pot down and pressed her fingertips to the metal rim. Daniel could see the math working in her eyes. Small feels safe. Safe feels invisible. Invisible feels familiar. Familiar is not the same as good. He didn't rush in with encouragement. He didn't offer the scaffolding of, "You've got this," or "It's okay." Instead, he let the quiet be a stool she could stand on. Lily, sensing the wobble without understanding its pedigree, said, lightly, "Our song list got a new one. It sounds like rain tapping a window. We voted, and it got 3 votes." "How many voters?" the waitress asked, a wryness surfacing despite everything. 2, Lily said. "But it got 3 votes because it's very good." The waitress smiled at the unfair math, and the smile steadied her. "I like that," she said. She lifted the coffee pot again. "Would you like a warm-up?" The sentence was clean from start to finish, no detours into apology. Daniel slid his mug closer in answer. He met her eyes long enough to say, "I see you working." She nodded almost imperceptibly. "I know." Another Friday, the radio played a song that used to mean something to her, and Daniel saw the surprise of recognition cross her face like a shadow and then pass. She stayed beside their booth and, quietly, to herself more than to them, practiced reading the room instead of the old story. Breathe where it's kindest. Daniel had told her that first week. Now he noticed a small scrap of paper taped on the wall near the pass, where she could catch it in her periphery. The words were there in her own handwriting, a note from herself to herself. No one else seemed to know, and that privacy gave the sentence power. Lily began offering a weekly review of bravery in ordinary things. "You didn't say sorry at all," one night. "You did the long sentence with 2 commas," another. "You told the radio to be a little quieter, and it listened." The compliments were funny and exact. The waitress accepted them without deflecting, which was its own kind of work. What changed in Daniel wasn't loud either. He noticed how the ritual carved something out of his week, a quiet place where he didn't have to invent fix-it words. In the rest of his life he solved, he organized, he anticipated. Here, he practiced the discipline of staying present, modeling for Lily the kind of listening he wanted her to both offer and insist on receiving. Parenting, he thought, is teaching a child how to be treated, and some lessons are learned sitting in a diner while rain introduces itself to a window. One evening near closing, the waitress arrived with a small, clear jar and set it on the counter within her own line of sight. A handwritten label curved across the glass. Classes. She didn't announce it. She didn't describe a plan. She simply placed the jar and went back to work. Daniel and Lily noticed at the same time. Lily lifted her eyebrows at him, and he nodded as if they were watching a lighthouse being installed. Later, as she wiped their table with a damp cloth, the waitress glanced at the jar, then at them. "It helps to see it," she said, answering the question they hadn't asked. "Not the money, the word." "It's a good word," Daniel said. "It feels like morning," she replied, and he recognized the callback to the song. "Even if I'm tired." Lily leaned forward. "What will the class teach?" "To breathe and to stand and to let words finish," the waitress said, half teasing, half true. "To hear my voice without editing. Like when I draw and I don't erase until the end," Lily said. "Exactly like that," the waitress answered, and for a moment the three of them shared the easy certainty of an analogy that fit. On a quieter Friday, she practiced reading, just a menu description, nothing dramatic. She stood at their booth after refilling water and, with her order pad closed, said, "Our soup tonight is tomato basil, and the grilled cheese comes with a side of slaw or salad. We can make the edges of the sandwich extra crisp if you like." Her voice didn't wobble. She finished the period and didn't rush to leave the space after it. Daniel watched her realize she had arrived at the end of a sentence without fear. The realization seemed to place a small, surprising light behind her eyes. "It sounded like the radio," Lily said. "The good part?" the waitress asked. "The part before the good part," Lily clarified. "When you know it's coming." They tried not to crowd the progress. Some nights Daniel and Lily spoke mostly to each other, letting the waitress orbit and land as she needed. On those nights, the ritual became its own instruction. That showing up consistently can itself be a kind of help. That you can be a witness without being a judge. That trust grows best when no one is taking its picture every 5 minutes to prove it's taller. When the month turned and the rain gave way to a cleaner, colder air, the waitress greeted them with a voice that had found a warmer center. "Good to see you," she said. No rising question mark, no glance to the floor. She took their order, and, when she brought the plates, she asked Lily, "Would you like me to tell the pancakes they can be brave, or do you want to do it?" Lily considered. "We should both do it," she decided, practical as ever. They counted down with exaggerated drama and then, together, told the pancakes to be brave. It was silly and kind and, to Daniel's surprise, moving. He felt the pressure in his chest that meant gratitude had outpaced the vocabulary he had ready for it. Before they left, the waitress wrapped a small napkin around the warm syrup pitcher and handed it to Lily, who held it like a delicate animal and returned it to the table with care. "You're good at carrying warm things," Lily observed. "It's hard." The waitress glanced at the jar on the counter, then back at them. "I'm learning," she said. There was no apology inside the sentence, no footnote about how far she still had to go. Just an honest inventory of a person in motion. Daniel slid a few bills under the check and stood to help Lily into her jacket. At the door, he looked back. The waitress was at the pass, reading the next ticket, lips moving as she mapped her breath, a small scrap of paper with her own handwriting watching over her shoulder. "Breathe where it's kindest." He wondered if she knew the sentence was already doing its work, changing the room without asking the room's permission. "See you next Friday," she called, and the call carried, not loudly, but far enough. "See you," Daniel replied. "Adventure pancakes," Lily added, "because every ritual deserves its benediction." They stepped into the evening, and even the air felt like they were the last table left when the hour turned quiet in a way even the radio respected. Chairs went upside down onto tables one by one, making small pitched roofs across the floor. The cook wiped the flat top in slow, practiced arcs and set his towel to soak. Neon washed everything in soft color, and the bell over the door stopped pretending anyone else would come through. The waitress set a pot of hot water on a tray with 3 cups and a small bowl of lemon slices. Unasked for, the kind of kindness that doesn't require ceremony, and brought it to their booth. "Closing in 10, she said, not as a warning, just naming the shape of the night. "You can finish. No rush." Lily was drawing on a napkin. two stick figures holding hands under a crooked line of rain. She looked up. Is that us? I think so, the waitress said. She hesitated, then added, May I sit, just for a minute? It was a question she asked like someone trying on a coat that used to fit. Please, Daniel said, sliding inward to make space. He read the room. Not just the empty booths and the dimmer radio, but the steadiness in her shoulders that hadn't been there weeks ago. The jar labeled classes sat on the counter within her sight, coins and a few bills catching the neon like small, honest promises. She took the edge of the seat, posture straight as if a teacher might grade her sitting. Steam curled up between them. Lily carefully added a third figure to the napkin drawing, gave it hair that didn't quite behave, and nodded at her own accuracy. The waitress followed the gesture, smiled, and rested her hands palm down on the table, a public placing of self Daniel had learned to recognize. I was thinking about words, she began, and then stopped, measuring. No, about what comes before words. The part that decides whether they're allowed out. Daniel poured hot water into one cup and pushed it toward her. Gatekeepers, he offered. Exactly, she said, surprised into relief that he knew the terrain. I'd like to change who guards the gate. Lily looked up, serious. How do you do that? Practice, the waitress said, then corrected herself, and help. She glanced toward the counter at the jar. I put that there because I'm saving for classes. Public speaking, reading aloud, learning how to stand in a room and be heard without asking permission first. She exhaled and laughed once, quietly. The goal scares me in the good way. What's the goal? Lily asked. The waitress touched the rim of her cup. To teach, she said, and, as if the word itself were fragile, set it down gently between them. I used to volunteer in a reading group. I like the way a sentence gets taller when a child understands it. I stopped when things got small. I want to go back. Maybe at the community center. Maybe here, unofficially, when the room is friendly. She lifted a shoulder, shy but not apologetic. I don't need big. I need true. Daniel felt the sentence land with the quiet weight of a decision that had already begun. He thought of the scrap of paper by the pass, breathe where it's kindest, and realized this was its next line. Sounds like morning, he said, echoing their earlier language. She smiled at that. A private recognition looped into the present. It does, she said. Even if I'm afraid, I'll open my mouth and hear his voice correcting mine. She let the admission stand without flinching. The classes are a map. I like maps when I'm lost. Lily tapped the jar with her pencil from afar, as if christening a ship with a wand. We made a song list, she reminded her. We can make a brave list, too. That's a good idea, the waitress said. She looked at Daniel. I keep thinking bravery has to feel like fireworks, and then I remember how the first loud thing I did was leave. It didn't look brave. It looked like a small person walking out the door. Maybe that's the shape. Bravery is often administrative, Daniel said, and the truth of it made them both laugh. A quick, unguarded thing that cleaned the air. He added, it's also repetitive. Showing up until your voice believes you. She grew quiet in the way of someone checking her pockets for the next word. Would it be all right, she asked, if I practice here sometimes? Not during the rush. Just a paragraph or two. You don't have to listen like judges. Just like people. Lily sat up straighter. We are very good people, she assured her. We are, Daniel agreed. And you're welcome to practice. He considered the dignity of the moment and added, on your terms. When you say, the gratitude that crossed her face did not collapse into apology or deflection. It settled, warm and visible. Thank you, she said. She reached for her cup, then paused, choosing. There's another part, too. I'm saving for the classes because I want to pay for them with my own work. Not because I think help isn't allowed. Because I want my voice to know it can carry weight. The statement was careful but not unsure. It will know, Daniel said. The cook clicked off the last of the overheads, leaving the neon and the undercounter lights to do the rest. The room felt honest in that light, edges soft enough that people could admit to wanting things. Lily pointed to the jar. How many classes is that? 2. Maybe, the waitress said, glancing over, doing the mental math of hours and tips and bus fare. I need 4 to start. 6 to feel steady. Lily nodded as if this were a contract. We will keep eating pancakes. That is a heroic contribution, the waitress replied, smiling. Thank you for your service. They sat a moment with the shared humor, then with the quieter thing beneath it. Daniel recognized the precise tension of beginnings, how they glitter and threaten in equal measure, how they require a person to let go of the story where they were small. He remembered the first months after Lily's mother left, the awkward choreography of building a home that didn't rely on noise, the way he learned to make the kitchen a warm place where questions could land without breaking. He did not share the long version. He offered the part that mattered. "You'll have days when the gatekeeper returns," he said, "when you'll walk away from a sentence and think you failed it." He looked at her until she looked back. "Come back the next day anyway." Most of the world's progress is made by people who returned after a bad rehearsal. She absorbed that, not as slogan, but as method. "I can do that," she said. She turned to Lily. "Would you help me practice a tiny thing now?" Lily brightened. "Yes." The waitress reached for the menu, folded her hands instead, and took a measured breath that traveled to the bottom of her lungs. "Good evening," she said, clear and even. "Welcome. I'm glad you're here." She let the words exist in the room without rushing to justify them. "If you need anything, I can bring it. If something isn't right, I can fix it. You don't have to apologize for asking." Lily clapped once, softly, like a stage manager. "That was the good part," she declared. The waitress laughed, a sound of unhidden joy that found its own volume. "Thank you," she said. Then, quieter but no less sure, to herself, "I'm glad I'm here." The cook called a friendly goodnight and disappeared into the back. The waitress stood, collecting their cups, moving with that small difference Daniel had learned to notice. Not larger, only more aligned with herself. She set 2 wrapped cookies on the table, their usual closing night kindness, and glanced at the door. "I'll lock up in a minute," she said. "Take your time." Daniel slid out of the booth to help Lily into her jacket. "You have a map," he said, nodding toward the jar and then toward her chest where breath began. "And you have a voice." "I do," she said. She didn't make it a question. She didn't make it a wish. She made it a sentence that could hold its own weight. At the counter, she tucked 2 bills into the jar. The sound they made against the glass was not dramatic. It was ordinary and right. She returned to their booth and, with a small, deliberate bow that felt half like thanks and half like rehearsal for the front of a room, said, "See you next Friday." "See you," Daniel replied. "Adventure pancakes," Lily added, the benediction complete. They stepped into the night. The neon hummed. Inside, the jar caught the last light and kept it, and somewhere in the quiet space between the bell and the radio, a new gatekeeper took up her post and left the door open. By the next Friday, the jar on the counter had changed in a small but decisive way. The label, "Classes," was the same, the glass the same, but the bills inside were folded with purpose, not crumpled like accidents. The waitress greeted them with a voice that met the room without backing away from it. "Good to see you," she said. No question mark. She set down the warm pitcher and, almost shyly, tapped the jar with a knuckle as if introducing a friend. "How many is that?" Lily asked, already climbing into the booth, already reaching for crayons that lived in the pocket of her jacket. "4," the waitress said, eyes flicking to Daniel as though he might verify the math. "Enough to start." Daniel felt the word settle. "Start. Not plan, not someday. Start." He nodded once, like you do when the ground underfoot is solid and it's time to walk. "When's your first one?" "Monday," she answered, and even the way she said the day had structure. "I called and put my name on the list. I wrote it down next to the pass, so I can't forget without seeing myself do it." A quick smile. Administrative bravery. Lily beamed. "We made the brave list," she reminded her, rooting in her jacket like a magician again. She produced a small square of paper with boxes and lines, each item lettered in careful block print. She read with ceremony. 1. Put jar on counter. 2. Ask for help. 3. Practice sentences. 4. Make the call. 5. First class. She slid a stubby pencil across the table. "You can check for." The waitress laughed, free, surprised. "May I?" At Lily's solemn nod, she leaned over and made a neat check, then rested her hand on the table a second longer than necessary, as if claiming the moment's weight. "Thank you," she said to Lily, then to Daniel. "And you, for listening without fixing." It made more room. "Rooms change when people inside them change," Daniel said. He nodded toward the little scrap near the pass where her handwriting lived. "Breathe where it's kindest. You've been changing the room for weeks." She followed his gaze, then returned with one of her own. You gave me permission to believe I wasn't being foolish, she said. Sometimes that's the hardest permission to sign for yourself. Daniel considered how to answer and chose the truth he could stand behind. It isn't foolish to invest in a voice you have to live with for the rest of your life. He let the sentence rest, then added, You're allowed to take up space while you learn. Something eased in her posture that had nothing to do with muscles and everything to do with the gatekeeper she described. She placed waters on the table without rushing the motion and turned, deliberately, back to face them rather than retreating. Can I practice one more thing? She glanced around the room. 2 other tables, the cook humming by the flat top, the radio owning the quiet respectfully. A slightly longer sentence. Please, Daniel said. She centered herself, feet planted, chin lifted the smallest degree, and spoke toward the room, not away from it. Welcome, she said, even though the welcome had already been issued. I'm glad you're here. If you need anything, say so. I can help. She stopped. Let it exist. Didn't apologize for its size. Lily gave a small, official clap. That's the part before the good part, she declared. I could hear the good part getting ready. The waitress's smile went all the way to her eyes. I could, too, she admitted, and the admission did not reduce her. It made her reel. Orders stacked. The bell tapped its small metronome. The room remembered it was a diner. She moved through it with the awareness of someone who knows she's practicing even while she's working, and that both count. At one table, a man interrupted his companion twice in a row. Reflex tugged at her to make herself scarce. She exhaled, stayed, and said in her steady voice, I'll take your order when you're both ready. The sentence was not a scold. It was a boundary set at table height. The man blinked, laughed awkwardly, and gestured to his companion. The waitress wrote, then met Daniel's eyes across the room for a bare second. Did you see? He tipped his chin. I did. When she returned to their booth with dinner, adventure pancakes and eggs because rituals have their own nutrition, she set the plates down and didn't immediately step back. Monday at 9, she said, like a promise to the table and to herself. The class is in a small room. 10 people. A circle of chairs. She rolled her wrist once, unconsciously loosening a joint. The first assignment is to say our names at a volume that feels true. Not loud, necessarily. Just ours. What will you say? Lily asked. My name, she answered, and tried it quietly. Then again, a shade clearer, like a song finding its key. She didn't add qualifiers. She didn't make a joke to shrink the moment. I'll say it. Good, Lily said, content. We'll clap in our kitchen at the same time, so it echoes. Daniel lifted his coffee. We'll be here Friday, he said. Tell us how the room sounded. She took that in as if he'd handed her a ticket that guaranteed re-entry. I will. She looked at Lily. And we'll add another check. Lily leaned conspiratorially over the table. You can make the boxes smaller if you want to do more checks, she advised. It's legal. The waitress's laugh was light and certain. Good to know. There was a wobble that night, because change doesn't ask permission to test resolve. A plate hit the rail wrong and clattered. A customer at the counter complained about the coffee as though it had conspired against him personally. The old instinct to apologize for existing flared. You could see it in the way her shoulders tightened and the edges of her mouth began to search for the word. She caught herself, pressed a palm to the counter, and swapped the script. Thank you for telling me, she said evenly. I'll brew a fresh pot. It was a tiny reroute, a choice made in real time, and because it was hers, it held. When the rush passed, and the radio grew a little louder in the slack, she drifted back to their booth with the pot she'd promised and a quiet pride she didn't announce. Daniel didn't praise as if the room were a stage. He met the moment like a colleague in a hard job who knows what good work looks like. That sounded steady, he said. It felt steady, she answered. And then, after a beat, thank you for hearing it. They ate. They talked about songs that feel like morning, and Lily drew a new bridge on the window with her fingertip. This one with thicker planks, this one with railings. When the check came, Daniel slid the bills under the edge and Lily, with gravitas, walked her pencil and box list to the counter to park beside the jar for safekeeping until next week. The waitress looked at the paper like it was a contract that obligated her to kindness. At the door, she called, See you Friday. And when she added, I'll have a report, it sounded less like a worry and more like belonging. See you, Daniel said. Adventure pancakes, Lily added, because every good plan likes to be named. They stepped out into a cold that made breath visible. Behind them, through the glass, Daniel saw the waitress turn, touch the scrap by the pass. Breathe where it's kindest. Then pick up a pencil and write another small line beneath it. Begin where you are. It wasn't a trumpet. It didn't need to be. Permission, he thought, is quiet most of the time. It holds a door and lets a person walk through on their own feet. 2 months folded themselves into the kind of time that builds, not just passes. On a Saturday morning that smelled faintly of floor wax and paper, the community center opened its doors and let in a small weather of people. Parents with coffee, kids with backpacks, and old radiators hummed that insisted everyone be a little more awake. A printed sign on a corkboard read, "Reading aloud, find your breath." Below it, a second line in smaller type, "Begin where you are." Daniel and Lily took front row chairs in a bright room with windows as tall as hope. The chairs were arranged in a circle, not facing a stage. No one stood above anyone else. Lily smoothed her skirt with both palms and placed the brave list on her knees, a fresh box penciled in at the bottom, waiting. The waitress, no tray now, no apron, just herself in a simple sweater, stood near the whiteboard, one hand lightly resting on the spine of a book. The jar had done its work and was back on her kitchen shelf. On the table beside her lay a stack of handouts, a pitcher of water, and a folded paper where her own handwriting peeked out. Breathe where it's kindest. For a moment, she let the room breathe first. Then she planted both feet, let her chin rise the smallest degree, and looked around the circle until her gaze found every pair of eyes. "Good morning," she said, and the greeting landed with the color of a window opening. "My name is," she said it clearly, neither shrinking nor performing. "I'm glad you're here." The air changed half a shade, that almost inaudible shift when a group decides to become a class. She continued, voice even, "Today we'll practice reading in a way that is kind to the body and honest to the sentence. We'll talk about where to breathe and why silence is part of speaking." She paused, not from fear but on purpose, showing rather than telling. "And if your voice shakes, it just means it's carrying something." A child across the circle, knees skinned, shoelace wild, raised a hand halfway, then all the way when she nodded. "What if I mess up?" "We don't fix mistakes here," she said. "We finish them." A few adults smiled, recognizing the mercy in that grammar. "You can try again." Trying again is part of reading. She invited the circle to stand and roll shoulders, to drop them, to feel the floor like a friend. "Names at a volume that feels true," she cued. Around the room, voices introduced themselves, some quick, some quiet, some stumbling into clarity. When it was Lily's turn, she said her name with the proud steadiness of someone who'd been practicing on Friday nights. Daniel followed, offering his with nothing extra, content to occupy exactly the space it needed and no more. The waitress opened the book, a story about a lighthouse and the people who keep it, and traced the first paragraph with her finger before she read. "Listen to where the sentence wants air," she said. Then she began, not loud, just present. She rode the line breaks like tide, let the commas be rests rather than breaks, and chose pauses that made sense to the meaning instead of to her nerves. When she reached the period, she let silence finish the work for her. No apology chased it. "Where did I breathe?" she asked, looking around. A child pointed to the middle. An adult named the 2 commas. Lily raised her pencil like a baton. "And there," she added, "before the important part, so we'd be ready." "Exactly," the waitress said. She didn't perform humility. She received the observation as collaboration. "Who wants to try?" Hands went up, small, large, shaking, steady. She passed the book. Each reader took a piece of the paragraph and returned it sounding a little more like themselves. Midway through, she stumbled on a phrase. The class watched the moment approach the cliff. She smiled, true, unflustered. "Thank you," she told the stubborn word, as if it had reminded her she was human. Then she read the line again, slower, and nailed it. No one applauded. They didn't need to. They felt the rightness move through the circle like tide. Between turns, she taught little anchors. "Plant your feet so your breath has somewhere to land," she said, demonstrating with a shift of weight that any child could copy. "Let your voice ride the meaning, not the fear." She drew a small diagram of a sentence on the board, not to impress, but to show people where their courage could stand. Daniel watched her work with the professional eye of someone who recognizes craft being built in public. She didn't shy from detail. She also didn't drown anyone in it. When a dad in the back confessed he hated his voice on video calls, she didn't tell him to love it. She handed him a method. Pick one sentence you say often, she said. Breathe before the hardest word. Let that breath be permission, not apology. When the hour reached its wide middle, she invited a child to come stand beside her. Pick a sentence, she said. The girl chose the one with the lighthouse beam sweeping across the harbor. The waitress crouched to make their eyes level. Where should we breathe? She asked, giving the authority away, then taking it back with care when the girl asked for help. They read it together, the room counting along with their quiet. Lily was still as a candle, her seriousness glowing. On the brave list, she sketched a tiny box and labeled it Teach. She didn't check it yet. She looked up and waited for evidence. Last thing, the waitress said near the end. We'll practice listening to our own voices with kindness. She poured water, took a sip, and told the class what Daniel had known from Friday nights. Listening without fixing changes a room. She asked them to read one line each, eyes open, then read the same line again with eyes closed. Notice what story comes up, she said. If it's cruel, it isn't yours. Daniel felt something in his chest unclench. The body remembers rooms, too. He thought of Lily's quiet bedroom years ago, the measured cadence he learned so she would fall asleep knowing the world would hold overnight. Watching the woman at the board, he recognized the kinship. Different roads to the same shore where voices are allowed to be both strong and kind. The class ended the way beginnings should, with next steps small enough to do. Pick a paragraph you love, she said. Read it once a day this week. Mark where you breathe. Come back and tell us where the meaning grew. She didn't oversell. She didn't promise transformation by Thursday. She promised to practice. People stacked chairs and folded their handouts into pockets. A few stayed to ask a question, to share a line that had always frightened them. She answered without hurry, claiming the authority she had earned and refusing the pedestal she hadn't asked for. When the room thinned, she turned toward Daniel and Lily, not as a performer receiving review, but as a person greeting friends who had witnessed the rehearsal. Well, she asked, a hint of mirth to soften the weight. How did the room sound? Daniel asked back. Like morning, she said, and this time the word arrived without the tremor of wish. It sounded like measurement. Lily held up the brave list, pencil poised. Check, she asked, all business. Check, the waitress said, and Lily drew it with a flourish that nearly tore the paper. They laughed, the kind of laughter that knows what it costs to make a small box on a small list means something enormous. By the door, a flyer waited with dates for the next sessions. She peeled one free and handed it to Lily. We'll keep practicing, she said. You and me and whoever shows up. We'll be in the front, Lily promised. We clap at the right parts. The waitress glanced at Daniel then, something private and grateful passing between them without needing language. Thank you, she said. It held everything it needed to hold. He didn't make a speech. He offered the sentence that true things earn. We heard you. She unlocked the rolling card, stacked the markers, wiped a small smear from the whiteboard the way people erase yesterday's weather. Before she left, she taped a new scrap of paper beneath the first. Let the period be proud. It looked good there, plain and sure. Outside, the day had the clean brightness of ordinary victory. Children tugged at sleeves. Parents compared calendars. The radiator sighed into its afternoon. Daniel and Lily stepped into the corridor, the brave list folded but present, their weekend already arranged around a practice they didn't have to name. Through the window, they could still see her in the empty room, placing 2 chairs back into the circle and then pausing, as if listening for an echo that finally sounded like her. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried.